Suppose I would be telling you that in the morning the sun rises in the east. It wouldn't surprise me if you were looking at me quite baffled. What is he telling now? Of course the sun rises in the east. Every morning she does. And your feeling will be that of this fact is so evident that this is natural. It's like concrete. It's a very stable truth. In the morning, the sun rises in the east. Full stop. Suppose now that I would tell you man has a mind and a body. Again, you would look at me quite baffled, because indeed, again, that's the truth. Nature is like that. The human condition is that man has a mind and a body. Well, the argument I want to deploy in this contribution is that there is no mind and that consequently there is no body neither. How will I do that? I will try to demonstrate that the image of man is a model which is changing over time, changing over history. And in that model consists or is built on concepts. Now, concepts, you can understand that as a kind of interpretation, parts of interpretation, building blocks. But now a concept is a quite difficult thing for someone who is not really in the business of psychology or philosophy or human sciences altogether. So therefore, I will start this contribution with an explanation on how to understand a concept. I will follow that with an overview of different models of man, of different models of the image of man, because having a mind and a body is not the only one. There is a certain relation between them. Thirdly, and this is the main part, I think, I will explain what the historical differences is, the historical changing steps are in the appreciation, in the understanding of the mind. And rounding up, I will end with the position I just explained, the position that there is no mind and consequently neither a body. I have mentioned that concepts are the central building blocks. But the question arises, where do concepts come from? Well, there are two options. One option is that concepts are natural things. They are in everything that lives has concepts, a conceptualization of the world or parts of the world. It's natural, full stop. The other option is that concepts are perceptive cognitive constructs particular to a certain culture and changing over time as the culture changes over time. So a historical background. I will give 3 illustrations in order to make clear this position, this changeability of a concept. And the first will be, suppose I'm walking with a bushman somewhere in Africa, and we both see on the floor a grub, a white, worm-like substance, wiggling, fat, and to me it has the impact of I'm going backwards. I'm disgusted by that ugly thing. While for the bushman, he's taking it and puts it quite happily in the mouth because for him it's an extra treat. It's full of protein. So what do we have here? We see the same thing, but we have a different concept of it. Second situation. I'm walking again with a companion, but this time somewhere in the woods in Europe. And on the floor, on the floor of the forest, we discover a brown substance, something like an egg, not an egg, but a sausage. A sausage is a better word. Something like a sausage. And for me, it doesn't mean very much. I don't recognize it even. While my companion, who is a fine tasting man, who is a cook, he recognizes a truffle. So for him it has a very different significance. The point here is not so much the difference in appreciation, but that we see different things. With the grub and the bushman, we saw the same thing, had a different appreciation. But now I didn't recognize it. It didn't mean anything to me, while for him it was a gourmandise, something very costly and very fine to eat. Third situation. Suppose I'm walking again, but now in a rocky part in the mountains. I'm walking again with a companion, and I must say one of my hobbies is geology. So when I look at the wall of the mountain, I see layers, I see faults, inclinations, etc. So it's meaningful to me. Walking further on, I ask my companion, well, did you notice such and so? And he looks at me with some amazement because he didn't even see it. So with the grub, we saw the same thing. With the truffle, we saw something, but I didn't recognize it. And now he didn't even see it. So these are three situations in which three kinds of conceptualization is coming forward. So far, I have made clear that by the illustrations, I have made clear that a concept, the form and the content of it, is changeable according to different situations. But the question remains, what is a concept? Well, a concept can be understood as the ability to recognize something as meaningful in a meaningful context. Secondly, one must also be able to represent the concept in the absence of the very thing. So one must be able to think about the concept if the thing is not there. But one can now ask, or one could now ask, suppose or suggest a concept then is that not the same thing as a word? It seems to me like a word, but well, actually it is not. Suppose now there is a horse in the prairie. Now, horse in English is horse. In Dutch, it's paard. In French, it's cheval. So there is a different words for one concept, for the same concept. One might now think that concepts are based on language. And to a certain degree, for the human, it's the case, but it's not necessarily the case. Concepts, suppose now a cat. Now, the cat, every time a cat sees something sausage-like with a rope on the end, the cat doesn't have to deduce, sausage, rope, mouse. No, the concept of a mouse is built gradually by experience, to such a degree that at a certain moment, the cat sees a certain form, a particular form, and it's, mouse. So, that's it. Now, another striking example of conceptualization I find, and I appreciate it very much, is the case of Lawrence, the ethologist, the animal psychologist. He went into the pond swimming just at the moment that the ducklings were coming out of the egg. And their particular way of conceptualization is that the first thing they see, they take that for their mother. Not actually for their mother, but for the function of their mother. So they conceptualized the human figure, the human body of Lawrence as mother duck. I find this a very striking illustration of the act of conceptualization. So far I have tried to explain what a concept is. Allow me a last example. When I pronounce the word radio, anyone familiar with a radio will have a particular image before him of what a radio is. Despite all the different types, all the different kinds of particular radios in the world, of concrete radios in the world. Well, that prototypical image is the concept. Now, as I explained, the concept is important because the conceptualization, concepts, are the fundamental building blocks of models. And we are talking about a model here. We have the image of man consisting of a mind and a body. This is the model of man. But it seems self-evident, but is that the only image of man? Is that the only model? Is that the only interpretation of the model mind-body? Well, not at all. There are two different strands, dualism and monism, on which I will elaborate somewhat. Not too deeply, just giving some examples. Now, on the strand of dualism, there are two types of dualism. There is the dualism in substances, in relation to substances, meaning that the mind is considered to be a different substance than the body. But there is also a dualism of characteristics, of features. So supposing that there is only one thing over there, but it has very different characteristics, namely mind characteristics and body characteristics. On the relation of both, because it's dualism, on the relation of both there are also very different flavors. And one of them is interactionism, meaning that the body is working it has effect on the mind, but in reverse, the mind also has effect on the body. Another variation is occasionalism. We have interactionism, now occasionalism. Occasionalism dates from the 17th century and is introduced by Görlitz. And he tried to explain the relation between the two substances as following. He says, suppose you have two clocks and they are set to the same time. Well, they are two different things, but wherever they are and running correctly, they will always indicate the same time. So, mind and body are two different things, but working perfectly in concert. There is another flavor which is somewhat familiar to that, and it's called parallelism. And parallelism, we can today speak of correlation, think of correlation in that context. Now, think of the search for the consciousness, the location of consciousness. And you put some individual into an fMRI scanner, and you see the man being conscious, being in the condition of being conscious, you see lighting up some regions in the brain, in the neural tissue. One can think now that like Libet did, that the activity in the brain is causing consciousness, but that's not correlationism. Correlation means that it's going together. When you think of something, when you are conscious of something, some region in the brain is lighting up. No more than that. It's a parallel working. It's a bit like the clocks of Görlitz, but it's something different too. A last flavor I want, there are many more, but the last flavor I want to introduce is Epiphenomenalism. And what's this? There is the body, and the body is generating the mind. Epiphenomenal. The mind is a phenomenon generated coming forth from the body. But there is no causal, the relation is causal from the body to the mind, but not in reverse. Now that, so far for what concerns dualism. But there is also monism. And what is monism? Well, I will give some different strands in the same sense as I did for dualism. There is extreme physicalism, extreme materialism, and we all know someone who says, there is only matter in the world. There is nothing else. Everything is material. Point final. Nothing more. There is a more moderate form of that, moderate materialism, stressing that there is matter, but recognizing that it is something, that it might be possible that something is coming forth from it, that a mind-like thing, experience might be coming forth from it. There is also the identity theory. There is only one thing. In that theory, there is only one thing. There are different names for it. For instance, we have the morning star and the evening star. Both are different words for the same Venus planet, of the same planet, namely Venus. So in the same sense, there is only one thing, but we have two different names for it, mind and body. We have the double aspect theory. Now the double aspect theory is the same thing again. There is one substance, but there are two dimensions to it, two aspects to it. The question here then is, of course, what is that one substance? And I think that's more or less giving an idea on the complexity of the matter. So the model mind, body, the model of the image of man consisting of mind, body is not all that simple as it might seem at first glance.